Hello, my name is Yutaka Watanabe, a tax accountant. Welcome to the channel. Tax Accountant Nabe solves your money problems. Today, I'd like to talk about what happens if you ignore contact from a tax investigation. First, imagine this scenario. One day, you casually open your mailbox and find a notice from the tax office inside. At that exact moment, your heart suddenly pounds, and instinctively you freeze, thinking, no, maybe I'll just pretend I never saw this. I understand. Wanting to avoid something frightening is a completely natural human defense mechanism. There is nothing unusual about it at all. However, what I want to tell you today is just how dangerous that very choice of doing nothing can become. It can trigger a devastating chain reaction, like a row of failing dominoes. What actually happens when you continue ignoring contact from tax office? Some of you listening right now may already feel anxious, but this is one reality you absolutely must face directly. If you do nothing, time will not simply pass peacefully. Ignoring contact from a tax investigation means using your own hand to push over the very first domino that can shake your entire business to its foundation. Now, let's go through how those dominoes begin to fall. Phase 1. The cost of ignoring it. The acceleration of the unavoidable. Some people think ignoring contact is simply a passive action, but that is actually a major misunderstanding. If you respond properly, you usually have room to discuss scheduling with tax office and say things like, this date would be less disruptive to our operations. However, from the very day you ignore that latter, you effectively give up your right to negotiate one of the most important aspects of the investigation, the schedule itself. This means losing control. The longer you leave the situation unresolved, the more options disappear from your hand, one after another. There is probably no worse situation in business than having everything proceed entirely on the other party's terms and at the other party's pace. Phase 2. The start of external investigation. Collateral damage begins. While you remain silent, hoping the storm will simply pass, the tax office will not sit quietly and wait. Have you ever heard the term third-party investigation? This means that instead of dealing directly with an uncooperative taxpayer, in other words, the tax office begins directly investigating related parties. Because someone hesitated to make a single phone call, an issue that might have remained inside, the office can suddenly escalate into a full-scale public credibility crisis. The targets are often your business partners and financial institutions. That thought alone is chilling, isn't it? By remaining silent, you may cause the tax office to directly contact and investigate your important clients and your main bank. It is essentially like throwing mud onto the trust and credibility you spent years building. Phase 3. Escalating tax office tactics. The compilation of total encirclement. The longer the situation is ignored, the tougher tax office method becomes. Eventually, this can lead to unannounced investigation. One day, without any prior notice, investigation suddenly knock on the door of your office or store. Your staff are thrown into chaos, and business operations for that day become to a complete halt. This is the worst possible surprise, one that might have been avoided with a simple return phone call after receiving the first notice. Furthermore, if you continue refusing to provide accounting records, estimated taxation may be imposed. In this case, the authorities calculate your tax based on their own assumptions, essentially saying, you probably earn about this much. Naturally, they are not going to carefully include every expense in a way that benefits you. You may end up facing figures that are overwhelmingly unfavorable. Final phase, the ultimate penalty, when the dominoes finally collapse. First, you may face a procedure called a corrective tax assessment. This is a legal action in which the tax office officially, ultimately, and forcibly rewrites the tax returns you originally submitted. Once this happens, arguments such as this expense was justified for the following reason are no longer accepted. Their decisions become the absolute rule imposed upon you. And then comes the greatest fear of all, the heavy additional tax penalty. This is not some minor late payment, change, or small amount of interest. If your actions are judged to involve malicious concealment or serious violations, an enormous penalty can be added on top of the original tax amount. Something that could have been avoided with a single phone call may ultimately turn into a devastating financial burden that threatens the survival of your business itself. In the end, the risk of administrative sanctions and heavy additional tax penalties continue to grow. I hope you truly understand the terrifying weight carried by that single sentence. Finally, ask yourself this: is the temporary comfort of running away from reality for a brief moment really worth the risk of completely losing control of your business? By pretending not to see the latter, all you gain is a few days of false peace of mind. In exchange, you may lose the trust of your business partners, live in fear of sudden investigation, and carry massive penalties on your shoulders. By now, I believe you fully understand just how dangerous and irrational it is in business to simply cover up a problem and hope it disappears. Once you receive the notice, first take a deep breath, then act immediately. That is the only way to protect both yourself and your valuable business. Today, I spoke about the topic, what happens if you ignore contact from a tax investigation. For more information about tax investigation, please also visit the page for Yutaka Watanabe Tax Investigation, Tax Accountant Office. I will continue sharing contents related to money. So, please subscribe to the channel. Tax Accountant Nabe solves your money problems.